Welcome to Exploring Digital with Purr, a podcast for entrepreneurs and CEOs who want their businesses to benefit from a digital-first approach. Hi, Nick here, and welcome back to Episode 1, Part 2 of Explore Digital with Purr. In Part 1, we were speaking with Tom Jepson from Footprint about all the ways in which development and marketing teams should work hand in hand. We pick up the story in Part 2. I hope you enjoy it. So one trend we've picked up on over the last few years, and it's impacted a lot on how we work, how we develop sites, and how we plan work, is the importance of performance of a website. So that's not just that the server it's on is configured well and it's got capacity to deliver a site well, but that the coding that goes into a page and the constraints you put on a content management system about what you can allow an end user to add to the website has just become the most important thing that we do in terms of how it impacts technical SEO at a later date. And it has such an impact on the whole process in terms of design and planning through development and what you do in an ongoing sense to manage that website. But it also can mean that really you shouldn't be considering doing the website in the ways that you've done it in the past. So plenty of organizations traditionally use, a WordPress theme off the shelf. And that's such a no-no nowadays because they tend to just be so sluggish, so many libraries and JavaScript and code built into them, that it leads you down this route into a site that you can never optimize in all the ways you want it to. People pick hosting platforms like WordPress.com, which don't allow you to do some of the caching things that you would have done otherwise. There are some issues with it, but there are also some great wins that you can make, things like Cloudflare, caching platforms that are really quick wins. What do you think are the biggest sort of failings of most web projects to consider performance?
Well, I think, from Google's perspective, they have been pushing this for a long time, and it will continue to push is in terms of the performance in relation to speed.
Yes.
That's obviously a really key thing. We're all becoming less patient, as we all know.
It's amazing how it's inversely proportional to the uptake of newer speed technology. So you've got 5G coming supposedly
like that,
with Huawei, and yet we still need ever faster websites.
I know it's not like we're back in WAP technologies and you've got seriously slow connections. You've got things like 5G coming in, but still, speed is of essence. Speed and security as well.
Yes.
So you'll see even through like Google's Chrome browser how even they're highlighting if you have
not
HTTPS,
secure.
it's saying this site is not safe, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's just continued to become more kind of a flag, if you like, which isn't good for people. I think people want to feel safe online, so if they go to a site and they're thinking that it's not secure or something like that, then that's not going to be.
But that does also have a search engine impact. Yeah,
definitely. So what they've said is, this is quite some time ago, they said, look, if we had two pages exactly the same kind of weighting, if you like, if they were, one was HTTP and one's HTTPS, we'll rank the HTTPS higher. And back in the day, and this is quite a few years ago, everybody jumped on the bandwagon, kind of switched straight over to HTTPS, and some didn't see the benefits that they expected. But that's changed now. We generally recommend, move straight over. If you're not under HTTPS now, you should be. And then in terms of performance, you've got to think about the speed of the site. What can you do to make that faster for users? So it could be using caching techniques or Cloudflare or CDNs and things like that. Anything that you can do to improve the performance. It's not from a search perspective, really. It's from a user perspective, and that's why Google cares so much about it.
Absolutely.
The user requires a quick, snappy website that works and is safe. I think the other thing in terms of performance, with using things like JavaScript, Google's come on leaps and bounds in its ability to kind of render pages that have content built in through JavaScript. So
things like React and frameworks like that.
Historically, JavaScript was you're using JavaScript. Well, Google might not be able to see certain elements of the page,
or penalise you for doing so because they think it's black hat or.
So there's even times whereby I've seen sites that have completely unintentionally done stuff that's got them kind of in trouble or been a potential cause and red flag from
because it looks like keyword stuffing.
Yeah, it looks dodgy and things. But the most common one is that it can't find the content on page. So if you think about it from a search perspective, you've got to have content relevant to somebody's query. So if Google's loading your website and your web pages and it can't actually see the content on there, then that's a big problem. Now, that's been overcome largely through Google's ability to kind of render JavaScript and actually render the web pages rather than just pull down the raw HTML. But even last week, I saw an instance where a website is using JavaScript, and for some reason, Google's just had trouble in trying to index that content. So it resulted in, all their news articles and things like that just weren't being found by Google. And if they're not found, they're not going to get ranked. So you've just got to be aware, and this is kind of where we come in with the development agencies, is, we want sites to be intuitive and interactive and flashy and nice and amazing experiences. But what we tend to do is come in and just make sure that, okay, is Google still able to get access to all that and it not affecting the search performance, if you like. And hopefully, things like JavaScript and Google's ability to render content and things.
It will only improve.
Just continue to improve.
But I do think it's interesting how there's so much of a drive for simplicity in sites, and if anything, the development aspects of them probably you are encouraged to build like the simplest site you can in so many ways. Yeah. And I think that has great benefits for user experience as well. I think there's this, we've moved away from this tendency to just stuff a page with so many elements, and and I think everyone understands and focuses on the idea of getting to what you need quickly, which is fantastic. How do you see that working with websites that use technologies like React? Is that a different process for you guys? If someone says, well, we're building a headless WordPress website, but we're using React for the front end.
Okay, so we're actually working on that exact type project for us now. Historically, we would have gone, oh, really? Seriously? This could be potentially problematic. But, it's obviously we need to be aware of those things up front so we know what we're dealing with. But really, it hasn't changed the way that we're approaching it. We've just got to do a bit more thorough checks and more technical elements to ensure that the content's being rendered and accessible. So no, they don't really affect or cause us any problems. We can kind of work with them. We've just got to be aware of them and obviously just
slightly
make
different techniques.
Yeah.
And I guess it's up to the developers as well, if you are using any particular techniques on the back end, if you're using Yoast or things like that, to ensure that they're incorporated into what they're building for the front end, if it is headless.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And some of the technical elements that we've had problems is not Google not being able to find content. It's when it actually, like faceted navigation is a classic one whereby there's a million different pages that you could filter your products by. The problem is Google finds a way to crawl all these, so you've got hundreds of thousands, sometimes almost an infinite number, and that's meaning that Google's coming back and checking all these redundant pages really that are of low quality, which means you only get allocated a certain amount of crawl budget. So if you have lots of these pages, Google's spending loads of time looking at this stuff that you don't want it to and not concentrating on the areas that you do. So a lot of it's working with agencies, and that's when we have it in a development environment, and we'll basically simulate Google crawls and kind of stress test it and find if we can find any weird loops or holes or things that are going to cause indexing problems.
Very good. So one thing that we notice most often, I'd say, even if we put in a great back end and the SEO setup has been really well thought through and there's monitoring going on, one of the common pitfalls is people then adding images that are too big and just not using kind of compression tools out there. I think if anything, it's driven us towards unifying our approach to just work with WordPress and Drupal when we're doing web builds, because they've got it pretty well sussed now. There's some good systems in there, but some older technologies we supported, things like Silverstripe, were harder to do that on, didn't have inbuilt image editing. And I know it seems unfair on marketing teams to kind of ask them to understand what really image compression and cropping and all these. You're asking Photoshop skills from someone who probably doesn't have that background.
They don't know. They don't realise that that's like a 4K massive billboard size
So,
image.
so is there a technique or a kind of a procedure you recommend to people for that that's a really kind of quick win?
I think that it's an education thing to say, look, we don't want to compromise on quality, but it's just, if you're uploading images, size and resizing them for the web is a good idea. There are plugins and things that you can use in there. From a search perspective as well, it's about doing a relevant alt text and things like that. So search engines are able to, and screen readers are able to know what that image is about, rather than just calling it image 1 or whatever it might be. But
logo.
Yeah, we still come across those kind of meet the team pages where you load it up. It literally takes ages for each person to do, and that's because it's only an icon.
Circa 1999,
But the actual image in the back end is like a full high res.
It's
20
making a thumbnail on the fly.
Yeah. So I think it's more education to clients in terms of what's there. Obviously, when we crawl the websites, we're looking for images with high file sizes that we can potentially go and reduce the size to improve speed. But as you said, there's a lot of the systems these days you can put plugins that help kind of reduce it. But at the same time, I'd rather keep plugins to a minimum and try and address the problem rather than trying to fix it on the fly and add overhead. That's the classic thing with WordPress is it's the attraction to just, there's plugins. Let's just plug in as many as we can.
On that topic, do you encourage end users to use Yoast? Or
I think Yoast is one of those. There's a few different ones out there that are
MathRank
similar. There's a few ones. Yoast is really the kind of popular one that's been around for a long time. And that just gives you additional functionality to optimize not just your pages, but also set up things and configure things like sitemaps and various stuff.
What about any sort of SEO? Are there any SEO health tools you recommend? You kind of advocate to clients to keep an eye on things like Neil Patel or SEO Optimer or any of these systems out there? I might use.
We use like uptime monitoring software as well.
But just in terms of like SEO performance of a site.
We tend to use some of our in-house tools, and we tend to use things like Screaming Frog and things. Okay, so as well as other crawlers, so that they can do simulations of.
But there's nothing you'd say to a client. Here's one you might want to try.
I mean, there's things like Moz toolbars and various tools from Moz,
but it's more of a training requirement, on them.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, it feels like there have been two major trends that have directed the way that websites have evolved over the last few years, technology aside, and those are the user experience and what makes Google care about a website. So everything about the journey on the site, the prioritization of content, the design that you put into it to make it really clear, but then also, as we spoke about already, the security, the performance, the quality of content. And how do you think those two should be weighed up? Is there a trade-off?
It's a good question, and I think people get into like SEO, and it's like, right, how do we please Google, right? But the key thing is that Google's main aim is to try and please the user. So really, it all comes back to trying to think about how can we make our website and the content and the experience on our website such that it's going to please the user, because ultimately that's what's going to help things from Google's point of view. Now, historically, you used to be able to cheat the system. People would just do really basic things. Really early days, it was like how many times is a particular word mentioned on a page? And you'd get web pages that would just have keyword spam. Literally, they would just repeat the same thing over and over. And that is really like infantile search engines. Nowadays, Google's way more complex, and it's starting to look more understand the better what content's on your website, but also understand the user and their intent and their needs. So there's been a lot of developments over, just Google's ability to understand natural language and queries better so that it can return more relevant results. So I think really it's not about trying to please and focus on Google as such. It should always come back to the user. And what we do is search anyway. We're doing research into what are people searching for, what are they interested in, what are their needs when they're searching for those kinds of things, and coming up with strategies and contents and features within sites that will fulfill the needs. Because that's ultimately longevity focused is you're looking to fulfill the needs of what your users are searching for, really. And historic ways of trying to please Google and trying to hit perfectly on the algorithms kind of assessments of your site, it's just becoming less and less influential. And I think, it should be just focus on the user and really try to understand what their needs are and not get too hung up about search engines. That said, you still need to recognize that search engines are essentially text readers. Therefore, you can't just have a page that has, an image, a real inspirational,
really dynamic experience.
Yeah, exactly. And expect that to fulfill the needs of, your users' queries. That's just not going to happen. So it doesn't really. The point I'm trying to make is it doesn't come back to what Google needs. It should always come back to what is the user need and what are they searching for, and how can you deliver a site or a page that really fulfills that need? Because ultimately, that's what's going to lead to success. And going out there and looking at what else is currently ranking for those kind of terms. If you've got something out there that somebody spent serious amount of time and effort creating a brilliant resource around a thing, were you creating one page that is a half-assed attempt, so to speak, it's never going to outrank what's
Completely.
already there. So you've got to look at, what you're up against and really think about what the user needs. Having an understanding of what Google likes and dislikes, speed, performance, accessibility, things like that. That's important, but focus on the user. That's actually what Google always say, focus on the user, and all else will follow.
One question I had was, I guess follows on from there, is that do you think, because there's so much of a credibility given to what Google thinks about a business, right? Do you appear in search terms for that topic? Do you think Google's prioritization of specific content has actually driven businesses themselves to specialize?
I think so. I think some people have gone down the tactic of let's go hyper niche. And you can see this in loads of different industries and affiliates especially. They'll go like super niche, as in I'll be the specialist on this particular topic.
Because it's easier to rank.
Yeah, because it's easier to rank. And the thing is as well, the more specific you go, the further down the conversion funnel you are. So if I search for shoes, it's so abstract. It's the one that has, if you look at the numbers, it's the one that has, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of searches every single day, month, week, year, whatever. But am I wedding shoes? Am I sports shoes? Is it shoes for my kids? It's so abstract.
Horseshoes.
It's so generic. Horseshoes, perhaps, yeah. That not all that traffic is going to be relevant. But if you go down to, let's say, Nike shoes, then you can see people are starting to explore different brands.
Yep.
You go down to actual a type or
product line
or a model in a more product sense, then that person is closer to the end conversion point.
Yes.
So it's a case of not always going for the shiny big numbers of searches. When you go niche and you go specific, that means your audience is going to be more relevant to you and probably more interested to convert as well. Yeah. Because they're more aware of what
certainly we see this in the agency world. The more specialist you can be, we both know that benefits our marketing and our positioning. But you now get, well, I'm going to be a user experience agency for events in Surrey, and now you're going to pick up those clients hopefully, because as you say, you're so far down the funnel.
Yeah, and I think that does work. And the thing to recognise is digital is a very saturated space. Absolutely. I can remember when I started my career, it was trying to convince people that they needed to rank at the top of Google for certain queries. It's like, well, why would I want to do that? It's crazy. But that's changed this. Yeah, it does. I'm older than I look, Nick, you know that. But it just goes to show, like, there's so much competition that people are, going even more niche around what their topics are. And, from a search perspective, you need to be realistic as well. If you do home insurance or something like that, you need to recognise that you're going to be going up against, big aggregators and beasts. and therefore have realistic expectations. So in that instance, you might want to go super niche in a particular area or have a particular.
But it's one of the reasons I think it's so important that digital isn't something that's relegated down to the digital marketing manager. It should be something that hopefully wider business gets involved in, because it can drive business strategy.
Yeah, so I mean, speaking about the digital marketing manager is quite an interesting topic, because that person, we have an analogy, we call it the head chef analogy, right? And it's like, if you had a head chef in your restaurant, would you expect the head chef to cook the food, to wait the tables, to take the bookings, to update the website, do everything else, right? Of course you wouldn't. It just wouldn't function very well. You probably wouldn't want to eat at that restaurant.
That's the sous chef's job. They do all of those.
Exactly. So, but it's the same in a marketing capacity. I think within a lot of small organisations in particular, it's like, right, we've got the marketing guy. He knows he's taking care of everything marketing. And there's a big blurred line between marketing and sales anyway within many organisations, in my experience. But that person's expected to know all these different things. And you just look at digital alone, and that person needs to be analytical, they need to be creative, they need to be business-minded, they need to be technical, they need to be able to write content, they need to be skilled in SEO, PPC, email marketing.
But I also think it's not necessarily, it can be a non sequitur, the idea that you should be a digital marketing manager. So much of our positioning now and our understanding is digital shouldn't be relegated to just marketing, and technology shouldn't just be IT.
No,
it's how can you get all of the brilliant things that those techniques offer you and get them across your business, because there's so much that can drive you or bring efficiencies in or help you find out who you really are and what your customers want from you.
Yeah, and that's why I say that we always say that the digital marketing manager should be, that head chef person, the person that knows the product better than anybody else, that knows the organisation, the audience, what the needs are, and can craft these great things. And what they do is they get other specialists and other people that are good at the other bits, because who can be as skilled in all these different areas? It's impossible.
I'd like to find them.
And so would I, because I'd employ every single one of them.
So Tom, we've challenged ourselves to come up with our 3 biggest no-nos or big tips for if you're planning a new web project or if you're planning a migration project.
And
I think my 3 would be, it's a big failure if you don't bring the development team into the planning stages. It's one of my biggest bugbears, and it just tends to result in the biggest problems for budget and actual delivery. My number 2 would be writing the brief before appointing the team, or at least speaking to the people who your contenders for the team, because it's just preparing to fail. And number 3 would be expecting a website project to be a discrete activity rather than an ongoing one.
Yeah,
so those would be my 3.
I agree with those. I think they're all really important things. I think from my perspective and from a search perspective, I'd say if you have an existing site and you're building a new site, my top 3 tips would be, firstly, if you're going to make any drastic content changes, either getting rid of content or like pages, let's get rid of a section, let's say, or let's really trim down and cut it down and go really minimal. You need to be just conscious there. And I'd say what you need to do is look at the data and identify the pages that currently rank really well and kind of ring fence and protect those. Otherwise, you're going to set yourself up for a potential problem when the site goes live if you change it. The other thing, obviously, from a search point of view, is redirects. So if URL changes, so if there's any change to URL structure or the domain name or something like that, then you need to make sure... if there's any change to the URL structure or anything like that, then you need to make sure that you're redirecting both users and search engines from the old URL to a new one. And that's going to just help with the transition. And finally, get your tracking set up. Really, really, not just putting Google Analytics on your site. It's thinking about, well, what do we want people to do on this site and what interactions can we kind of track? So this might be event tracking if somebody downloads a form. It might be search functionality within the site. Well, let's get visibility of what people are searching for.
Yeah.
Or it might be
down
contact
to
form.
click to call or whatever.
Click to call, even the info links, they're things that we track. So whether that's an email link to an email address, or whether it's a link out to their social media channels, because that will show you people that came to your site
and want to
did
engage,
certain things. So those 3 things would be the look, do not forget those, please.
Go on. And then, right, one last thing. If you've completely ballsed it up and you've migrated your website, but not really migrated anything, so you've lost your domain reputation, you've lost the quality content you had, you've mucked up the URLs, and you've lost your tracking ability, what would you say you should do?
So I think if you've gone live with the site and it's tanked in terms of organic search traffic, so if you've lost search rankings and things like that, what you need to do is understand and first identify where you've lost the traffic. Now, we've had people come to us in this different states of this. We've had people come to us after 2 years. We've had people come to us after 2 weeks saying, look, we've launched and it's going wrong. And the first thing we do at that stage is to try and identify which areas have we lost traffic. So we might look at pages that have changed and look at use things like Wayback Machine to look at what content was there before and what content is there today to see what's changed. A lot of it tends to be that they haven't got the redirect set up, so we have to go back and
and that is possible to sort of forensically put back together.
Yeah, so we've even, there's certain examples where it's been like 6 months, 12 months, even 2 years, where we've been able to reclaim some of that stuff. With the redirects, it's good to try and get them in place from the word go, but you can kind of pick things up. Because the other thing that you forget is that if you don't set up redirects, people that have linked to your website, those links no longer go to anywhere on your site. They go to a broken page. And for those that aren't really aware of SEO, links are a big deal when it comes to.
But it is something you can track. You can track, what 404s you're getting from what URLs.
So
and
Google Search Console is a great free tool that people can kind of come and see. Oh dear.
Well, I'd certainly say from my perspective, if you have really ballsed it up or something's gone wrong with your site, Google Search Console, if you haven't set it up before, can be a great place to start. Especially if you've been penalised. Let's say the site's been hacked and Google said, this is now a problem. You have to start with Google Search Console to rebuild its reputation.
And it's free, and I think everybody sets up Google Analytics, but they always forget about or don't even know.
I think it's still called Webmaster.
Well, in my eyes, it still is, because I still can't. They changed it about 5-6 years ago. I'm still calling it Webmaster Tools, but yeah, essentially, it's a free tool that will tell you how well your site is ranking, what type of queries, technical problems with areas of your site. So it's a gold mine and a no-brainer. So everybody should have that set up alongside GA.
Brilliant. All right, Tom, thank you so much for coming to talk to me today.
As always.
And really hope you've enjoyed the first Purr Digital Resonance. We'll be talking to you again soon. Thanks for listening. Bye. Thanks for joining us for episode 1. We'll see you again soon for episode 2.
Thanks for joining. Remember to subscribe and follow us, and to share today's insights with other businesses you know who want to stay relevant in a digital-first world.